3/8 of an inch on this foundation, what will that translate to the framing? It'll disappear by the time you set your first interior panel. If you're an inch, then you're gonna have to make some adjustments, and then you're gonna have to go in and start raising your plates and moving stuff around, right? What's that? Yeah, just hold the foundation straight. Okay? All right, interior panels. Where am I? So I probably don't have a really good shot of this because we set the floor trusses in this case before we did interior wall panels, but because we had the hanger. If we go to the YouTube video, let's just these are posted on your channel, Tom? Those slowed down ones?
Yeah, just, yeah. Day 2, day, there you go.
Okay, so this is the full length video where we've seen the subfloor already. The setting of the corners. Okay, so here you see the interior walls going in. Okay? So in this case, they still have the rim is sitting off to the side with the hangers, right? And they're going to line the entire interior with this interior wall panel, creating an 8-foot ledge all the way around the perimeter. Okay? At this point, this is where all of your discrepancies in your foundation are going to go away. Because at worst case scenario, if you're off an undesirable tolerance, you can shoot a laser and you can pick a high spot and you can bring the panels up anywhere that you want. Does that make sense? And because those aren't load bearing per se, like they're laminating to this, but we're doing some bearing there. But we can, if we got to shim something up a little bit, then we can do that. That's not a problem. Okay. All right. So this thing will go around. We'll set these panels all the way around on the interior. The second you complete that perimeter, you no longer have access to the inside. So you cut out one of your door openings. As you see, the front door got cut out right away.
Don't forget the header.
And then you see they put the ledger. Get this chair out of here. The ledger started to go in, right? And then they started stringing those across. So we're just going to skip that step altogether. Once the interior walls are stood, then we can just start laying out the floor trusses, and we got that same basically floor truss layout where you've got all the common length, the full length ones, and then the two that flank the stairway are going to carry to the LVL.
Yep.
Right? We'll run our shorts, we'll brace up the LVL on either side, and we'll put temporary framing across the opening, and then we'll start crating in or flying the subfloor panels for that second floor.
And so all of the exterior panels will be in place.
Nope. Nope. In this case, the exterior, the infill panels, there's 8 panels missing on the exterior. There's 2 on either side of the long side and 1 on the front and back. Those are the last panels to go in.
Is that just to get the trusses in easier?
It's for the trusses, it's for clearance. We have line of sight to the crane. It's access. We don't have windows cut out. So you can see them flying in the panels for the subfloor. And then you got the crew up there getting all the screws put down. Okay?
So the trusses are sitting on top of the interior panel
Yep.
on either end, but they're just
Nope.
they're just bearing on the edge of that, or there's
Nope.
a ledger on this one too?
There's a screw pattern. There's 4 structural screws through the outer panel into that, right? With the exception of the infill panels that they'll have to put those in at a later time, right?
That's
They're
what I
gonna
meant. So those
yeah.
trusses are just hanging out until
Yep.
they get the subfloor.
Until they get that.
Independent of the
That's right.
And then to back up just a little bit, so the subfloor on the first floor, you align the edge of the panels to one side. You let the, I mean, ideally they should be lined up, right?
Nope.
The other side, they're a little bit long. You just cut them off before the other opponent comes in.
Yeah, they'll be 2 1/4 inches long.
Got it.
The width of the 2-panel exterior wall.
When you fly in your first horizontal sheet, was there any problem of getting that in? Because you got probably tight tolerances end to end.
Yep.
Do you have to spread the tops of those at all, or can you?
I mean, the tolerances are tight, but everything is so close, and the worst thing that you do is you literally just chew on the corner a little bit. I mean, I've literally seen some of these the carpenters that are doing it, like the most brutal cut I've ever seen to try to remove 1/8 of an inch. It all gets hidden. But instead of trying to force it or spread it, just shorten the panel. Right? So one of the pieces that you got to keep in mind at this point, as you're standing those interior panels, when that interior panel gets craned in and gets set, a portion of that panel needs to have glue on it, right? So as you're standing on the inside, see if I can back us up to a spot where this would make sense.
So a general question, are you cutting everything, let's say 1/8 short, so you're never fighting stuff when you're putting stuff in, let's say a measurement is X and you cut in the 1/8 inch shorter or not?
On the interior walls, I'll take a measurement. I always like to, part of the thrill of doing this is these panels just all fit, right?
Right.
So if you're not relying on a series of panels that were all measured and cut by somebody, then you kind of are doing that. But in theory, a lot of the design is set up that you don't have to do a lot of that. You can just fly the panel in and it fits, right? And I know it doesn't seem intuitive. It seems like everything's going to need a little bit of elbow grease and a shoehorn, but they tend to fit where they're supposed to go, right? The interior panels, the front and the back are full panels, but the sides, they're not full panels. So you got multiple panels to get in there, and you typically fill them all in, and then the last remaining panel that you put in, you do a quick check. I mean, if you're off, that's where you make it up, or if you need 1/8 of an inch there, that's where you can make it up. But generally, the rest of it is pretty close. If you cut them 1/8 of an inch short, it's not that big of a deal. As a practice, if that's what you want to do, there's nothing wrong with doing that. The front and the back panels are going to be buried behind a joint, so you could cut them up to 1 inch short on either end and still make it work. Like you'd hide that gap, so you have that much room to play with. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
And also, Steve, and you may have already said this, that second sill plate,
Yep.
if that's cut accurately, lengthwise, those panels can't be off. You know, if it's 24 feet, those 3 panels are gonna fit on there, period. It's that close.
And this is what's
Unless you're-
interesting, Sean, is in all the framing I've done, I've never really thought of the press plate engineered trusses to be the least accurate thing on the job site. But compared to these panels, that's our biggest problem.
But they do vary, yeah.
I mean, they vary up to 1 inch. It was incredible. All of the moving we had to do was because these trusses were terrible, you know? And terrible, I'm saying, in reference to the panels. The panels are so tight that everything else, all of the sort of the sins of everything else show up.
How much of that could be moisture content of the floor trusses?
No.
They're just fabricated wrong?
Yeah, they're just straight up bad.
Because the longitudinal shrinkage on
Shouldn't be that great, no, but.
Okay, so at this point, you're gonna fly in your interior truss, or your interior panel, and the panel, let's say, sits on this wall right here. You got 8 feet of panel there and 8 feet of panel there, where you're gonna have lamination contact occurring. So when this panel goes in, you gotta already have that glue up. And there's 2 ways to do it. One is to stand in here and just glue on the wall, and the other is just to snap a line here and here and just lay it out on the floor of the panel. So depending on how many people you have on site, we've done it both ways. Some of you folks may not have heard this earlier, but We've done this panel configuration setting with a 5-person crew that took 2 days, and we did it with a 10-person crew that took 1 day. And the difference is the crane expense, right? Same number of person hours on the job site, but the crane was the difference. But when you have 10 people on site, you rearrange sort of the tasks that people would do, if that makes sense. Like putting up glue when you have 10 people, you have somebody else other than the panel person. The panel person is not going to sit and lay out beads of glue because they need to be cutting panels and getting the next one out. But when you have 5 people, the pace is a little bit slower, and while that person is waiting for the panel to come back, and then, they can lay out beads of glue on this thing. And of course, they need to time that, where they don't want that bead of glue setting down there and then skinning out, and something getting hung up, right? Where then they can't fly the panel, and then you got to scrape glue off. And that can happen, right? You just got to be aware of that. Does that make sense? So you fly these panels, you fly those interior panels, you cut out your opening, and then back to kind of what Dan was asking about these trusses sitting on top of here. This interior panel is not one total panel, and there's a seam. In some cases, there's 2 seams in this panel, and that seam will land in the middle of here, which will give us a little bit of flap. You're going to find in a couple locations, that's one of them in the setting of those panels, where you're just going to get some 2x and span that gap, tack, 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 and then throw a bracer out on the ground, tack it, right? And that gives you some stability. So that's kind of already going on, which then when you set that truss on top of there, you've got a little bit of stability to deal with there. When you have 10 people on the site, you can also start assigning somebody as they, okay, we're moved past this phase. Now the 2 of you go and start cutting out window openings. And so you start to see window openings pop up on this. From a security standpoint, in whatever neighborhood you're in, we'll take those cutouts and we'll just take them and we'll tilt them 30 degrees and tack them back to the wall so they're, you don't have a wide open building. You can see the very front exterior panel is still out. It's the last one that we fly in. That one obviously has to get glued on the stack before you put that up. And then when that thing goes up, you need to jump up with a bunch of bigger screws to get that glue pressed together, right? And then right away you want to have somebody going around the perimeter tacking everything off and starting that fastener pattern.
And the screws and nails are meant to go in from the outside.
Correct.
So
The temp,
do you have like 5 guys pushing against that panel when it's being screwed in? Because you're screwing through the fixed member and into the loose member, where you would prefer to go the other direction, unless you got a lot of resistance.
You're using the screws. You're using a set of screws as clamps. You don't need any back pressure to do that. They'll pull together. They're temporary. You got to back them out. That's the one, sort of the one trick there. We used to use a series of screws to get there, and then you had to every now and then draw the panels together. But one person on the outside with the permanent fasteners and clamping fasteners can do all of that work by themselves without anyone on the other side helping. They just got to remember to back those back out. Now we've had it before where the person on the outside setting up on ladder or scaffolding is driving a bunch of stuff through and left a dozen, screws sticking an inch into the building. Membrane was already up, insulation was up. We got these fasteners sticking in. You just go and zip them off with a grinder. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, so here we are setting trusses. Obviously, we want the crane to set the commons, and the rest of that can all be done by hand. But when the commons are set, then you want to bring up the plywood for the roof up onto the 2nd floor and leave it up on the deck there, and bring up all of the mono trusses and jack rafters up there. There is a framing detail that is required for the hip rafters. That requires you to notch the truss and put a corner block in for its bearing. So as you guys see on that drawing over there, how the trusses have a bearing point on this panel. They're going to sit 1 1/8 inches onto here, and then we've got a bunch of fasteners coming through the outside into the heel of that truss. Okay? When this going into a plan view, when we've got these panels sitting like this, okay, we're going to have a hip truss sitting into this corner like that. Okay? That hip truss needs to actually come back a little bit for it to line up. And so what we're doing is we're taking that truss and we're notching this. Okay? And then we're putting in that corner a block looks like that. Make sense?
Let's just get better bearing for the hip.
Yep. And then the rest of the roof framing is pretty straightforward. Running the subfascia all the way around and then sheathing the roof. So pretty standard, nothing different or fancy about that. Okay. Then when we get into the end of, let's say, framing, we should be here. Short of maybe having some openings or windows cut out, right? But this is basically the box stood, all the framing done, and now it's ready for roof, deck, framing, or sheathing. And then we start on, at this point, the next step would be, because they're independent of each other, can happen at the same time as roofing, and then the installation of the membrane. Okay? Prior to doing that, some of the things that can happen just for ease, and if you're doing all the interior framing, depending on if you need a weather day or depending on resources that you have available, you can start doing your interior framing. But some of the stuff that needs to happen at this point is cutting out the stair opening and getting access to the first and second floor, and then cutting out your window openings. And on this, if you look closely, you'll see that this is cut at a slight bevel to the outside, so it pitches. And so that's just taking the saw and setting it at a 7-degree bevel and cutting that bottom line. Okay, so you're going to cut these windows from the inside, and generally what I've done is when we've measured the windows on the inside, you mark them out, cut the two sides up, and then you take a 2x4 across, screw it to either side of the wall, and then put a couple screws in the panel. Then you can cut the top, cut the bottom, right? And then your panel doesn't jump out on you. Then you pull the screws and take it out and set it to the inside. So when you're cutting, your inside dimension is all going to be your rough opening, and so your window then will pitch out, so the outside opening is a bit bigger because of the pitch. And then this is one of the places you get to see the autopsy of the panel lamination, right, across that section.
Then have you been using those for stair treads or not?
Yep. So we've used the cutouts for stair treads. Most of the window openings, the rough openings, are.
Oh.
Exciting.
That's in my channel.
Oops. Here's a cross section of the subfloor at the stairwell landing wall. Right. So when we ran those panels, we ran them wild, right? So that subfloor was totally embedded into the system, and then we went and cut out that rough opening. That just gives you an idea, kind of like what that's going to look like, right? Does everybody make sense where this is at? This is at there's a window in the stairwell landing going from the first to the second floor, and this is the subfloor of the second floor.
But that piece below that
Right here.
subfloor won't be there, right?
This piece right here,
Correct.
That would be
Because
the
that'll be
panel.
that will be there.
Won't Won't be a
This
rim
is,
board,
so
but-
what you're not seeing, if I go down right here, you'll see another seam, that's the rim. So in the, in the new house, that panel won't be there, we'll have to infill that, correct. So this all can get cut out, and effectively, this piece right here ends just short down here, 20 inches. And so basically you'll cut out that piece and you'll infill all the way down, right? You'll have two seams there. Okay.
With that heel detail, is there any engineering that, from the truss company or anything that says that's okay?
We actually have a structural engineer. He's noted that on the plan.
Okay,
So what they'll ask for is us to get a structural engineer
right.
to engineer any modification. So then when you get up into that finish before interior walls, you've got this wide open floor plan, all the windows are cut out, stairwell is cut out, and at that point, you either got a ladder in that stairwell opening, or you can start framing out that interior stairwell. In the case with Habitat, we'll have all the interior walls already framed, and it's just a matter of standing them, laying out snapping lines and standing them, tacking them in place. Right? Or you could just have one big open room, and that's a design you could do. Maybe we change order, we do that.
Maybe one railing around the stair opening.
That'd be nice.
Okay. Some other interior wall details, you'll see that there's on the plan, there's some on the exterior walls, you're going to see some furring out that needs to occur, and these happen at the front and back door. This provides us with enough material to put in a standard door jamb, like a 4 9/16" jamb. Also allows you to have an electrical chase right there and put a switch on the outside wall. And we'll get into the electrical later, but all electrical that lives on the exterior walls is either run in the baseboard, right? It's all those outlets, or you've got two switch boxes, one at the front door, one at the back door, and they're in this sort of built-out, furred-out framing that occurs at the front door. And this is like the interior closet. And this is just flat framed because you got 2 1/4 inches already out there, right? And so you don't need to, you just need a total of 4 inches of framing. Okay.